just to get an idea, generally speaking, we know what Trump's doing, and we know what he has been doing and what he says he will do. And I think the big difference is going to be, well, there's going to be lots of differences. And I'm sort of taking it as a given that Biden will be elected because it's wishful thinking in one sense. It's hopeful thinking in another sense. And it's also just, I feel that people in this country have to be smarter than maybe the news media makes us seem, maybe than the tendency to privilege the loudest, most strident voices. I think that kind of dumbs down the conversation, the national conversation, to a great degree. If instead the media were to privilege the most thoughtful and insightful voices, we would have a very different national conversation. But in doing that, it moves public debate into a sort of a loftier intellectual realm that a lot of people have trouble following. And I think that the notion of just going for the loudest, most aggressive voices speaks to this kind of idea of lowering things to the lowest common denominator, of kind of speaking to the greatest number of people. Everybody can understand loud, angry speech. You might violently agree with it or disagree with it, but you understand it. You get where it's coming from. I hate immigrants. I love immigrants. It makes for a conversation that even the densest, least informed person can go, yeah, I mean, I don't know any immigrants, but I kind of hate them or love them just based on instinct, which is, really kind of, I think, how a lot of people think. But it's a huge, huge disservice to this country to do that, to take those voices and push them out front. I think to a certain extent, I'm bordering on saying that I am guilty of doing that in the sense of finding the most extreme anti-immigrant voices and saying, here's what they're saying. But in my defense, I'm doing that because these are the people that are actually in charge of running our government right now. So it's kind of hard. Like, who else's voice would I promote? Who on the anti-immigrant side of things, who's thoughtful and really critical about their thinking, what is the point of promoting their perspective when that's not the one that is defining the actual actions of the federal government? So to whatever extent I play into that two sides violently opposed form of media that I've just finished criticizing, I can say in my defense that I am merely bringing up the voices, the activities, and pointing out the activities and actions of the people who are literally in charge of dealing with immigration at this time. So I don't know who else's voice even matters on that side of things, because while there may be some thoughtful and worthwhile perspectives that oppose immigration, they're not in charge of anything. We're in no danger of them becoming in charge of anything at the present time or in the foreseeable future. So I can only hope that someday I can, we regain some sanity in this country and get to a point where I can actually bring up those thoughtful voices and consider their attitudes and their perspectives critically and with respect, because presumably there is someone out there whose opinion I could respect who has an anti-immigration kind of stance. But they're not in power. They're not going to be in power anytime soon, because the pendulum seems to be, and hopefully is, swinging in the other direction. And we're going to go away from anti-immigration as a raison d'etre. Is that how you pronounce it? Raison d'etre? As a reason for existing. And move to something where we approach immigration with humanity and an understanding of what immigrants can and do bring to this country. I mean, at this point, really, the rational voices on immigration are all on the left-hand side of the table. I don't hear or promote, I don't even run into any really radical, lefty, pro-immigrant perspectives out there, because it's almost impossible to have one compared to how incredibly rabid and off the charts the anti-immigration forces are in the country at this time. Like, I'm not even sure what a really over-the-top, crazy lefty perspective on immigration would even be. I don't know. I'm just sort of... I don't know. I'm not even sure what I'm doing. I'm just kind of thinking out loud right here, really. It's just because I started talking about the disservice media does by promoting radical voices as this side and that side. And if you're on this side, then this must be what you think. And if you're on that side, that must be what you think. I think that is a real disservice to a lot of people who have more balanced, nuanced perspectives about things, and who really constitute the majority of people. I really feel like the majority of people, even in this country, and I put it that way because right now, the U.S. is not really famous for being thoughtful and intelligent about its decision making. I mean, we're really terrible shape. The rest of the world is like, what are you doing over there? And a lot of us here are thinking, what are we doing over here? But we're just in a position of not having any real power to change the ridiculousness that is coming from and being promoted and enforced even by the current government. And so it's very hard. Anyway, I'm going to click on this because I'm just going around and around, but I would love to have a thoughtful conversation about immigration and the pros and cons of opening ourselves up to more immigrants and closing ourselves down and keeping immigrants out. I think there are things to be said on all different sides of that question that aren't being said because we're in the midst of people screaming on one hand, immigrants are poisonous, evil aliens who are coming here to eat our babies, and I don't know what they think immigrants are trying to do. They're invading us. And then people on the other side saying, no, that's not true. Or really a lot of what the pro-immigration voices are at this time are just repeatedly and consistently saying, no, that's not true, to all the crazy stuff that's coming from the other side. And I personally get tired of that. I would like to promote ideas, but I really spend far more time trying to shoot down and take apart ridiculous and untrue statements. And there's no time left to promote ideas because I'm tired after all of that fighting back. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to go on because I'm not getting anywhere here. But you can sort of see my conundrum as someone who does a show about immigration, who talks about it regularly, who deals with it regularly. It's a frustrating time. In one sense, there's a sort of focus that maybe wasn't there before, where it's just like there's clearly a bad guy, there's clearly a wrong way of looking at things, and so it forms like a very clear battle line. You're either for the administration, and it's easy to see who's kind of on your side or who's supporting your friends and loved ones and families, and who's against them. You can tell by who they're voting for, by whose policies they support. It's not, well, I think it should be more like this. No, I think it should be more like this. It's like, it's all this way or it's none of that. And that's kind of where we are right now. And I'm forced to be in the none of that category because there's just nothing that the current administration is doing that I can agree with. Nothing. That's it. I've said it. All I would be doing is repeating myself if I said it again. So anyway, I will move on to the next article. This is entitled, DHS Staffers Say Trump Appointees Wolf and Cuccinelli Ignoring Input on Protests and Immigration Policy. What a surprise. Acting Secretary Chad Wolf and his deputy Ken Cuccinelli are ignoring the input of career officials at the Department of Homeland Security on key policies from immigration enforcement to protest response, two current and two former DHS officials said. The sidelining by the Trump appointees is felt acutely in the agency's Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, or CRCL, where employees hired to field complaints about DHS and review new policies believe they are not being heard, said the two current officials who agreed to speak on condition of anonymity, which anymore you have to do that because they'll come after you. It's a terrible situation. Anyway, in recent months, CRCL has raised concerns about the development of a new use of force policy for Customs and Border Protection, the two current officials said, including concerns about the use of chemical deterrents against people trying to damage the wall on the southern U.S. border. But after raising those concerns, the office has yet to hear back on whether agents will be allowed to use chemicals to deter people trying to damage the wall. How about hurricanes? Hurricanes damage the wall. Anyway, according to recent reports, Cuccinelli removed CRCL from its usual role of reviewing the reports from the Office of Intelligence and Analysis. The office is recently accused of collecting intelligence on journalists covering the protests in Portland, Oregon. Just this week, employees at CRCL learned that they are getting a new boss, Patricia Nation, a former Justice Department official and former Republican candidate for Arkansas Attorney General. Nation most recently worked in DOJ's Civil Rights Division, the office dedicated to prosecuting violations of civil rights statutes. In a statement, a DHS spokesperson called Nation a consummate professional with years of applicable experience and said the policymaking process at the Department of Homeland Security often involves many parties, but not everyone's suggestions may make it into every final product or decision. It is unfortunate that DHS staff are complaining to the press rather than their supervisors because they feel their input is not adequately being taken into account. They feel their input. They're aware that their input is not adequately being taken into account. That's ridiculous. Okay, sorry. Aside from CRCL, 3 career employees from CBP and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, DHS's 2 largest law enforcement bodies, say they are increasingly being kept in the dark about new policies and planned operations, seemingly both to prevent leaks and to accelerate new policies in line with the White House's wishes. Michael Chertoff, who was Homeland Security Secretary in the administration of George W. Bush, recently criticized DHS for moving into Portland against the wishes of local authorities. I believe this is a dangerous precedent to set as our country faces so many threats that require these partnerships, Chertoff said. The ranking Democrat on the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, Gary Peters of Michigan, read the Chertoff quote to Wolf during a hearing Thursday and asked whether Chertoff was wrong. Wolf responded, "Absolutely. On this point, he is dead wrong." He said the agency tried to coordinate with Portland Police and Oregon State Police, but ultimately had a duty to protect the federal courthouse. A former senior DHS official who served during the Trump administration described being disappointed with Wolf's response to Portland and said there were other options to de-escalate protests. Nate Snyder, a DHS counterterrorism official in the administration of President Barack Obama, said President Donald Trump wants his own state-run police force. Snyder said Wolf is using the mission of protecting federal property as an excuse for violence against protesters without coordinating with local law enforcement. We already seen how that went, so no surprises there. Okay. This is a kind of a poorly written piece, but I thought it would be interesting for those who are interested in what actually happens when you're trying to become a citizen. Because according to many people, you should just wait in line, wait for your turn, and everything will be fine. But it's not that easy. So this is entitled, Once an Immigrant Has a Green Card, and that's the first step, and it's a big step. Here's what they have to do to become a U.S. citizen. Becoming a United States citizen provides rights and privileges such as voting, traveling with a U.S. passport, bringing family members permanently to the United States, which Trump is trying to stop, sponsoring citizenship for children born abroad, which Trump is trying to stop, and obtaining government benefits, which Trump is trying to stop. Sorry, I'm adding some editorial comments in there. Since applications for citizenship are currently taking up to 2 years, that's your waiting in line part, it is important that eligible immigrants submit their petitions as soon as they meet the requirements, immigration advocates say. The process often requires help from an immigration attorney, but some legal permanent residents try to obtain U.S. citizenship through naturalization on their own. The recently relaunched U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services website, or USCIS, contains numerous resources to guide foreign nationals throughout the naturalization process. The immigration agency outlines the following 10 steps to naturalization. According to USCIS, there are 2 general ways to obtain citizenship through U.S. citizen parents: at birth and after birth, but before the age of 18. This includes children of U.S. citizens residing in the U.S., children of U.S. citizens residing outside the U.S. Immigrants sometimes make mistakes when they submit naturalization petitions, but don't meet the requirements, which include the following. An applicant must be at least 18 years old at the time of filing, live in the United States as a permanent legal residence for 5 continuous years, or 3 if he or she got a green card through a U.S. citizen spouse. Show physical presence in the United States for at least 30 months during the last 5 years, or 18 months if married to an American citizen. Show good moral character. This means a clean criminal record for the previous 5 years and not submitting false information as part of any immigration form or procedure. A person with an aggravated felony is ineligible for naturalization. Be able to read, write, and speak basic English, and show knowledge of U.S. history and government. Be willing to support and defend the United States and the U.S. Constitution. Filling out the application for naturalization. Form N-400 is the request form used by legal permanent residents to apply for citizenship through naturalization. It must be filled in legibly, in black ink, and all the questions must be answered in a complete and precise way. Avoid some of the worst mistakes immigrants make applying for legal papers, such as crossouts or writing outside the spaces provided. And don't forget to write the petitioner's A number on the upper right-hand corner of each page. Here is a link to USCIS instructions for application for naturalization. Immigrants can create an online account to submit Form N-400 electronically, which allows petitioners to track the status of an immigration application, receive notifications and updates, and see estimates for the date of process completion. Once the application has been submitted, USCIS will schedule an appointment for the biometric services to take fingerprints, photo, and signature. The information is later sent to law enforcement agencies for criminal and security checks. The procedure is a local USCIS Application Support Center, in a local USCIS Application Support Center, normally takes 15 to 20 minutes. It is important to show up on time because there are new restrictions in place due to the coronavirus pandemic. Applicants must bring with them the following: notification of the appointment, or Form I-797C, valid photo IDs such as passport, green card, or driver's license, any other documents specifically requested in the notification. USCIS also recommends printing a copy of the completed application. The interview with a USCIS official. This is probably the most feared moment of the naturalization process. The naturalization interview and test. Immigrants must prove they can read, write, and speak basic English, and have essential knowledge of U.S. history and government. The USCIS officer conducting the interview will ask the candidate questions about his or her application and background in English. According to government instructions, immigrants must bring notification for the appointment, permanent resident card or green card, any identification cards issued by the state, passports and travel documents, proof of current civil status, divorce decrees, and change of name. USCIS will send applicants a notification of its decision. There are 3 possible scenarios: approval, continuation, which means the candidate will be required to submit additional evidence or documents, and denial, most likely based on ineligibility. Immigrants whose cases are denied can request a hearing before an immigration officer. If USCIS approves the application, the candidate might participate in a naturalization ceremony the same day of the interview, according to the agency's website. Otherwise, immigration authorities will mail the petitioner the Notice of Naturalization Oath Ceremony, or Form N-445, with the date, time, and location. Taking the oath of allegiance during the naturalization ceremony is a memorable moment. But because of the pandemic, the ceremonies are now limited only to the naturalization participant, without guests attending, and to people who provide assistance to candidates with disabilities. Immigrants first turn in their green cards, then swear loyalty to the Constitution, and at the end receive their naturalization certificate, which is official proof of U.S. citizenship. Authorities recommend that new citizens also obtain U.S. passports through the Department of State Bureau or Consular Affairs. Before leaving the ceremony, authorities also suggest checking over the certificate and notifying USCIS employees if there are any errors. Afterward, new citizens are encouraged to register to vote and update their Social Security records. Naturalized citizens are an important part of the social fabric of the nation. Citizenship carries with it benefits and requires an equally important moral commitment. USCIS stresses benefits and obligations such as the right to U.S. government protection, the right to vote, the right to work, the right to live permanently in the United States, the obligation to obey all federal, state, and local laws, the obligation to report income to the IRS, and the obligation to register with the military selective service for males aged 18 to 25. That kind of read more like an ad from USCIS than any kind of official guide to anything, but it was kind of interesting to see those things. Yeah, okay. I'm running out of time. I have one really short thing that I think I can squeeze in here. This is entitled The Epitome of Greed. Private Prison Corporation asks immigrants to bear cost of their detention. Attorneys with the Southern Poverty Law Center, or the SPLC, the Perkins Coie LLP, Project South, and the law office of Andrew R. Freed today filed a motion to dismiss CoreCivic's counterclaim against the plaintiffs in the forced labor lawsuit Barrientos versus CoreCivic. The private detention company filed the countersuit in June, claiming that if the plaintiffs win their case, they would owe the corporation the cost of their detention at Stewart Detention Center in Lumpkin, Georgia. CoreCivic alleged that if it were ordered to pay migrants for the work they were forced to perform, those detained people should pay CoreCivic for the very same services the company is already getting paid by the U.S. government to provide at a profit. CoreCivic's shameless counterclaim proves that the corporation prioritizes fattening its own pockets over caring for the people it detains, said C.J. Sandley, a senior staff attorney with SPLC's Immigrant Justice Project. The counterclaim offers a window into how the company views Stewart, which already has the reputation of being a miserable place, as being first and foremost an opportunity for CoreCivic to generate maximum profit. According to the lawsuit, CoreCivic violated federal anti-trafficking laws by coercing detained migrants to work in its $1-a-day program, in which migrants were paid as little as $1 per day to clean, maintain, and operate Stewart. While saving CoreCivic hundreds of dollars per week per detained worker, the scheme forced migrants to work by threatening them with solitary confinement, the loss of access to basic necessities like personal hygiene products, and denial of phone calls to loved ones. CoreCivic abuses, dehumanizes, and exploits the immigrants they detain at Stewart and then ask their victims to pay for the experience in return. The human rights catastrophe at Stewart demands we reimagine our unjust immigration system. Private corporations driven by their bottom line have no place in the lives of our immigrant friends and neighbors. According to the motion to dismiss, CoreCivic's counterclaim fails to state a claim that the corporation is entitled to payment from the plaintiffs. CoreCivic fails to allege that it ever expected those in its care to be responsible for the cost of basic necessity, nor could it plausibly claim it is entitled to such a payment from detained individuals when CoreCivic receives taxpayer dollars to operate Stewart pursuant to its federal contract with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. In recent months, CoreCivic and ICE have escalated their mistreatment of migrants at the detention center. At least 153 detained migrants have tested positive for COVID-19, and ICE has confirmed at least one COVID-19 death. To make matters worse, CoreCivic has retaliated to pleas for release and medical help with appalling use of force and medical neglect. I don't have time to comment on that, but I think it pretty much explains itself. Thank you for listening, for joining us. I hope you will tune in again, and we'll see you next time.